In a quiet, suburban neighborhood, an encounter between a police officer and a black man escalated in an unimaginable way. It started like any other routine traffic stop. A simple pullover for a suspected traffic violation, but no one expected the shocking revelation that would follow. This wasn't just any man. He wasn't some random stranger, caught in a routine stop. No, he was someone far more important than anyone could have imagined. The officer, a seasoned cop, wasn't expecting to meet the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. A black man, in his mid-40s, with a calm, almost unreadable expression, seemed like the perfect target for an officer who had spent years profiling people in this neighborhood. The officer had no idea that the man he was about to harass wasn't some minor player. He wasn't an average citizen. He wasn't even a suspect. But the officer, blinded by his assumptions, saw only a black man in a nice car and decided that this was going to be his next easy catch. "Step out of the car, sir," the officer demanded. His voice was forceful, tinged with arrogance. The man didn't flinch. He simply looked up, a steady calm in his eyes. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, his voice smooth and composed, with an edge that suggested he wasn't used to being treated like this. "You were speeding and your tags are expired," the officer replied, clearly irritated. "I'll need to see your ID." The man nodded, his hand moving slowly to the glove compartment, and that's when the officer saw something that made him pause, an expensive watch on the man's wrist. Not just any watch, but a brand that could cost more than a year's salary for most people. The officer narrowed his eyes, suspicious. "You don't look like you belong here," the officer muttered under his breath, though loud enough for the man to hear. That's when the tension shifted. The officer was no longer simply pulling over a driver. He had decided that this was a moment to prove his authority. He stepped closer to the window, eyes scanning the man's face. But the man didn't waver. He had been in situations like this before, though nothing quite like this. He was used to the game, to being underestimated, but this was different. This time, the officer's assumptions were leading him into dangerous territory. "What do you mean by that?" the man asked, his tone now shifting to something more direct, almost confrontational. "I mean," the officer smirked, "you don't look like someone who could afford to drive a car like this. What's a guy like you doing in a neighborhood like this?" The man stared at him for a long moment, letting the words settle. The officer thought he had won. After all, he was used to this. His assumptions, prejudices, had served him well over the years. But then, everything changed in the blink of an eye. "I think you should check my ID," the man said, his voice suddenly cold. "It might surprise you." The officer, now visibly annoyed, yanked open the car door and snatched the man's wallet. He flipped through it, looking for something, anything that could give him the upper hand. His fingers froze on a business card, an embossed gold logo. His brow furrowed. He leaned in closer, reading the name on the card. "Wait, you're the CEO of Fortune 500 company?" The man's eyes locked onto the officer's, and for the first time, a small smile played at the corner of his lips. He didn't need to say anything. His silence was enough. The officer stumbled back, almost dropping the card. His face drained of color. The power dynamics had shifted. Everything he had believed, everything he had assumed, was wrong. But the damage was already done. The officer had crossed a line, and it wasn't going to be easy to undo. The arrogance, the profiling, it was all laid bare in that one terrifying moment of realization. But the twist? It wasn't just that the man was the CEO of one of the world's most influential companies. No, the twist was even darker. As the officer stood there, trying to process the impossible truth, the man reached into the glove compartment once more. He pulled out a phone, and with a slow, deliberate motion, began dialing. "You've made a mistake today," he said quietly. The officer's heart skipped a beat. He was already regretting his actions, but it was too late. The CEO's voice was calm, too calm. And then came the chilling words that would haunt the officer forever. "You'll be hearing from my legal team," the CEO continued. "You've just made a big mistake. And trust me, you're going to regret it." The officer's mind raced as he tried to process the situation. Was this really happening? How could he have been so wrong? How could he have let his biases guide him so far off course? But just as the officer opened his mouth to apologize, the man's expression shifted. The phone call had ended, and the CO looked up at him with an intensity that sent a chill down the officer's spine. "Don't think this is over," the CO said, his words carrying weight. "You've just started a war that you're not prepared to fight." The officer opened his mouth again, but no words came out. The situation had spiraled out of control, and he knew it. This was no longer just about a traffic stop. It was about power, accountability, and a man who wasn't going to let his mistreatment slide. And that's when the story took its darkest turn. Part 2 will reveal the explosive consequences that followed, and the untold secrets behind the officer's past that may just change everything.